Do you consider yourself a high achiever? Smart, driven, highly successful? I am so excited to have you. My name is Julia Arndt and I'm the host of the Stress Podcast. I will help you develop your stress resilience the same way you've developed your workplace superpowers. Learn peak performance tools to thrive at work and in your personal life. Let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Stress Podcast. I have the utmost pleasure today to welcome Dr. Patrick Porter for the third time to the Stress Podcast. And I'm really, really excited, as always, to talk with you about BrainTap, neuroplasticity, and stress. How are you today, Dr. Patrick Porter?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. Great.
Yes. We've been working together now. I think the first time I interviewed you was in December 2019. And after that podcast interview, we got to talking more about, obviously, BrainTap, what BrainTap is doing. And we started a collaboration working together on the Peak Performance Method program, the 10-week program that I have, and having actually audio BrainTap visualizations, I would call them, or meditation. We don't really want to call it meditations, but applications in order to help the participants of my program actually bring their new learned insights more into the subconscious mind. And it's been super, super powerful and super successful. We've had a lot of participants over the last 2 years participating in the program. We have over 65, I think, at this point. And we've also were able to collect some research data, and we were able to prove that with BrainTap, because in the very first research study that we did together, we actually did a split test between people that did BrainTap, and then half of the group didn't do BrainTap. And so it was really interesting to see those insights, because we were actually able to prove that the people that did BrainTap were having even higher responses and changes to their stress levels, to their sleep quality, depression, anxiety, productivity, and mindset. I think the most powerful one was depression, because we were able to reduce it by over 70% in for our participants. So that was super, super powerful. And so we've been working together over the last 2 years on those research insights. And I'm really excited to have you today to talk with you a little bit more about the theory of stress and resilience. But I know I'm just chatting away, but I'll just want to give you a chance, for those people that haven't heard you speak before on the podcast, maybe to have you give a quick introduction of who I am and what you're doing in your life.
Okay. I'm Dr. Patrick Porter. I'm the founder of BrainTap. I've been doing like neuropsychology, I guess we would call it today, since the 80s. But in 2014, I was able to put it all together into miniaturize everything into a little headset. And now we display that through, we call it Brain Fitness, where we help people think, sleep, and perform better. So that's where you come in. And of course, you can't perform better if you're not thinking or sleeping better, but we want to get people sleeping again, because sometimes what we give up in the pursuit of all of this monetary gain or professional power, or whatever it is we give up our life in exchange for sleep and treating family poorly. So we want to make sure there's a good balance there. I mean, there's plenty of time during the day to have it all, but you have to balance that out and do that. So I think I've been in this field really my whole life. My dad was a psychologist, and he got help using a meditation technique called the Silva method, where we used a technology-driven meditation using a sound, using what they call the Silva sound to create alpha. And then I kind of went on beyond that and used electronics, which was my undergraduate. And then I went to school for psychology. So that kind of brings you up to date.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you wrote really many books as well in your life. How many books in total?
Yeah, we have 9 books that I've written, and 13 others I've co-written with people. Wow. And we last count, we had over 45 books that had a chapter or more on BrainTap in them. So a lot of the neuropsychologists and then really a functional neurologist are really coming on board. I don't know if since we've talked, there was a group that I remember back in 2014, I tried to get into their conference, and they told me that our device was just a gadget. They didn't think it was going to work.
Uh,
During 2020, they actually gave me a Lifetime Achievement Award in functional neurology because
wow.
of the BrainTap, because they had proved, and it kind of echoes one of the things we just proved out in one of our studies for traumatic brain injuries. We had between 30 and 70% improvement in all neurological markers 1 year after the study. So we wanted to show, we of course, you get improvement while you're in therapy, but what happens a year later? And what we showed was recovery is so important. Just like anything else, you can work really hard. The old saying, play hard, work hard. Well, what they're really saying is work hard, do something to relax. And a lot of
Yeah.
people miss that part. They give up their enjoyment of life in the pursuit of monetary gain. So we want to make sure there's a balance there.
Yeah. Um, so actually, I have a question for you on that. How did you deal with those rejections and those people that didn't believe in it as you were building this business?
Well, I just remember back to my high school dances. I get a lot of no's there too. So you just have to wait till somebody says yes. It was, and what I figured was maybe I can't get to the big doctors yet, but I have them all now. They love BrainTap now. We're in most of the neuro centers across the country. But I figured I'll just go prove it out. I'm one of those people that I don't get deterred. I guess I'm not smart enough to know if I've lost or not. I just keep going. I just figured somebody's going to. I'm a firm believer that the universe in general is conspiring with me for my success. That if something shows up that's a roadblock, it either means I need to work on myself. Even when I went in business for myself, if I didn't have a full schedule of clients, I would do a session with myself because I figured it must be me. It can't be the message. It can't be what I'm doing. It's got to be something within me. And I always felt that when I take personal responsibility, it's much better. And my thought was, I'm not showing them enough evidence. So now we have 11 different studies we just published. We have 12 more in the works right now. A is an ongoing study that we can keep adding to. So we just want to keep proving to people. The main thing is that we are resilient as a people, and we have the capacity to do far more than what other people are telling us. It's just our learning systems are so outdated that we're being judged by the 1800s. Instead of by the 21st century learning models that we have out there.
Yeah, and BrainTap has over 6 million downloads to date or plays, so that's incredible. Congratulations! I remember when we were starting to work on this, there were far less, obviously. So it's really cool to see how it's wonderful to have these kind of partnerships over longer periods of time, because you just see each other grow and see each other evolve into what you're really meant to do. So that's really great. And one of the things that I wanted to talk with you today about is the theory of stress and resilience, because I saw that you were talking on this topic at one of the virtual and online conferences, and I was like, this is such a cool topic. I'd love to dive with you deeper into that. Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, it's kind of like sharpening a saw. You can either do something to sharpen the saw and make it more powerful, or you can dull the saw. Right? So there's different ways to do it. When we think of stress, resiliency and stress is we can actually become more resilient under stressful conditions if we have the right attitude around it. If the old saying that which doesn't kill me makes me stronger, that's how they got the Marines to imagine they took away their clothes, they took away their identity, they took away their hair, all these things. And when they get done with boot camp, these guys can go after machine guns. I mean, they don't even know, because that stress actually molded them. They have a saying, it takes 10 weeks to make a Marine. We don't have the capacity to, or most people don't have the wherewithal to go to a 10-week boot camp to retrain their brain. But life itself gives us a lot of opportunities. And I think what's missing in the stressful conditions is you can't totally, when you think about the sympathetic and parasympathetic system, you can't just all the time be in sympathetic drive, which is what most business people are in. They just want to go, 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 go. They have a belief that the more you do, the better you're going to get paid off and all of that. And the reality is that we've got to have that time to really gather ourselves together, reboot. Those people that are most successful now, whether it be a sports, somebody who's really big in sports or in industry, they usually have some kind of meditation. They have some kind of way to get rid of that stress. And it's the periods of recovery that allow the brain to go, wow, that stressful event, it might happen again. How can we make our brain, our body, our life better so that we're more capable? I have with my background, the way I grew up was you never prayed to avoid stress. You prayed to God that you'd have the ability or capacity to handle it, right? So most people, if you look at that stressful event, instead of as a challenge, you look at it as a threat. That threat actually causes a cascade of the activities in the subconscious and in your neurophysiology that causes you to handle that situation less than before, because it doesn't think you've empowered it. But I mean, could you imagine a professional weightlifter going into the gym and complaining about lifting weights? They wouldn't last very long. They're stressing out their body physically. And we need to look at the same thing for our mental stress. And if we can do that, we start building, the brain is a servo mechanism, goal striving. So, but it's goal striving based on the data we put in. The old saying, junk in, junk out. We need to clean up the junk, right? And defrag our hard drives and, do all of this. And I think that's what meditation, relaxation, things like BrainTap do. And just so that those that didn't know about your program, what we tell people is we want to move people from different states, from an unknowing state to a knowing state. There's a lot of stress when somebody joins a program like yours and says, hey, this is a peak performance program, and then
I don't even consider myself a peak performer. I get this all the time.
Right. So people go, they got to compete with that, right? They want to know. So it's basically what most people who perform at the highest level, they do things everybody else can do. They just do it consistently. And they don't, it's kind of like I always show a picture when I'm doing a presentation of two girls on a roller coaster. It's a great picture. One girl looks like she's about to get sick, she's on the roller coaster. The other one's smiling and having a great time. And I go, This is the same situation, but their physiology is taking it totally different. If you're the girl that in the picture that I'm describing that's screaming and scared to death, well, I wouldn't get on another roller coaster. So we want to make sure whatever roller coaster you get on, that you know that it's not always the destination, it's the journey. And what I know about most peak performers I know is they enjoy the journey just as much as the destination. In fact, some of them don't like to finish something because then they got to start something new, because they love that newness, and they love the unknown and the stress, where some people just want to be consistent. They just want to know, hey, I come in, I click the time clock, and I get my break at 10 o'clock and my break at 12, and 3, and then I'm out the door at 5. I don't ever think about it again. So, but that's not the world we're living in anymore. We're in a world that's high impact, a lot of information.
Constantly connected.
Right? Yeah.
And so what if somebody is listening right now and thinks, well, I am, as you were talking about the Marines, I'm actually pushing myself to become a peak performer because I'm not taking breaks and I'm just pushing my resilience. What if they see that as a part of building resilience? Is that a healthy way to look at it? Or would you still tell them, hey, you still need relaxation?
No, they've done study after study, and they show that if you can have times that are, in fact, you talk about it in your course, there are times during the day when you have your peak. If you figure that out, you want to do your peak performance activities during your peak time. What we know, like with BrainTap, is you can have 2 peak times, because usually for most people that happens in the morning, right? When they do any evaluations of people, you get more work done in the morning. And in fact, a lot of places say we should only work 6 hours, but that's because they're going. But if you could take a break, we call it a brain break. You need a time for your nervous system to disengage. It's not always your psychology that's causing the problem. It could be your physiology. You're just pushing. And instead of eating healthy foods, a lot of people will forego health in exchange for convenience. And so there's a lot of different stressors we're talking about. So if it's just pushing, if you're pushing through your breaks, pushing through your things, there's a reason they have the breaks. They did a lot of research, and they figured out, hey, we can't keep working these people to death. They need, if we give them this 15 minutes and a coffee, they'll come back, bright-eyed and ready to give us 2 more hours, But in our personal world, I like the way you planned it in your program, because people should plan those times, and they should also plan the times when they're recovering. Recovery, we did a test with a Kansas City sport. This is a sports analogy, but it's from our research. And what we showed them with a professional athlete, when you work out, we can measure if they're recovering appropriately. So you can do this as a peak performer too, or anybody out there that's wondering if stress is giving them resilience. So what you do is, whatever you do, the start of your workday, use your smartwatch or whatever you use to measure your heart rate variability, and whatever that is, write it down. When you're feeling burned out, do another heart rate variability. Mm-hmm. Do something that's going to calm you down and whatever. What you're going to find, hopefully, like with BrainTap, we know for sure, you're going to downregulate. Really, it's called upregulating your HRV, because you're going to have better flexibility. Now you're going to have more energy, more life in what you're going to do. If you don't recover, like if you're doing this on your own and whatever your practices are, in 4 hours, if your body doesn't go back, so you can do this at the end of the day for those that don't have the time to do it. So you start your workday, get your HRV at the end of your workday, before you leave the office, before you leave your room or whatever you're doing your work in, check your HRV again. That night, usually before dinner, or at least 3 hours before sleep, you should review your HRV. It's probably going to be down about 10% from what it was in the morning. That's normal. But if it's more than that, most people that we measure, their inflammation builds up, because stress is going to the catabolic response of your body under stress, the cortisol levels. When you're going like you're talking about, your cortisol, actually, a year of high stress, they found, is 3/4 of an inch of your brain melts away. It shrinks because of that cortisol. So cortisol only gets under control if you can downregulate it. So you can't just keep pushing it. Like that person that says, I'm going through my breaks, I'm not taking lunch, I'm really working hard, 14 hours a day. Well, those are the people, like I give the example of the salmon. Every year the salmon go up the stream in Alaska, they lay their seeds, they fertilize them, and they die 2 hours later. Mm-hmm. That's what people are doing in their life. They're retiring and expiring. Our bodies, almost everybody agrees that if we were living in a perfect scenario, minimize stress, eating healthy, great relationships, good water, air, all the things we need, exercise, these bodies should live to at least to 120 years old with good function. They didn't give the elders in the tribe got the wisdom, not the young people. So when people say, oh, you're supposed to have dementia, you're supposed to have, no, you're not. Our bodies are designed to give us really good health all the way through. And we all know certain people that live to be 108 or 90s, and their faculties are about them. And they might not even eat healthy. There could be the genes, that they have. But we can set ourselves up for success by noticing the one thing that anybody can do for their health is, when you notice you're stressed, what are you doing? Do you run and get a coffee or a Coke or, some kind of soda? What you're doing there is you're basically putting a black tape over your light on your car that says your engine light's on. And then you're basically putting kerosene in, that's a signal that says it's time to do something. Now, you don't always have to do like my thing, BrainTap, but you could do breathing techniques. That's probably one of the best things people can do when they're, especially at work. You could be sitting in front of your computer doing some breath routines. Maybe it's a box breathing, breathe in 6, hold 6, breathe out 6, let it out for 6. Or you could, the one I like to teach people before sleep to really get into that deep parasympathetic sleep is the 4-8 breathing. So there's a lot of different breath. In fact, I don't know if you've seen on the BrainTap app, but we now have about 30 sessions of breath work while people are doing BrainTap, because it's really important that people learn how to breathe. The more stress we have, the less we breathe. It's just one of those syndromes that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do you manage your stress levels, Patrick? Because you've been building this incredible company. I see you all the time on Instagram lives and, on conferences, and you're a busy person. And, I'm always like, wow, I'm so impressed by how you're working. Like, how do you manage your stress levels on a day-to-day basis?
Well, number one, I do plan out times to do. When I wake up in the morning, I'm at the office right now, but at my house, when I wake up, I have a PMF mat with sound frequencies, and I do my BrainTap every morning, either a 10 or 20-minute session. That's every morning. And I also have a meditation practice that I do. So I take an hour and just do, myself, before I eat, I don't drink coffee till 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. And I usually will have a cup, because I like the taste of it. And I do intermittent fasting. So they usually eat around 12 or 1. When I eat, I only eat for an 8-hour period of time. So the longer I can put it off, the better for me, because sometimes we eat later than we should because of doing things like being on calls and things. And then every day, in fact, even today, my schedule is blocked at 2 o'clock every day, because I know at 2 o'clock your temperature drops and you're going to start to get tired. It's a natural physiological effect. So what I do at that time, it's on my schedule, it's booked. Everybody knows not to mess with that. Now, when I get some, like I've had some pretty big interviews that I will move, if it's a TV interview that has to be in that time period, but I'll do it at 2:30 then, or, before it. And I will block that out every day. I've not missed a day of using our technology since I created it. And because I've seen the physiological effects. I don't typically listen to my sessions at night anymore. I used to when I first started, but I sleep so well. I usually sleep in the 98 to 100 bracket of any, whether it be my Aura Ring or BioStrap or any of those, because I know how to master deep sleep, and I just put myself into that sleep. But when I'm on the road, when you see me on the road, I'm doing a BrainTap in the morning and I'm doing one before sleep, because a lot of times when you're on the road, you don't get that 2 o'clock. I might be, meeting with people or something like that. And then I've always got water going, because I know that I need to drink half my body's weight in ounces of water. And of course, I'm going to watch what I consume, because sugar is probably one of the most damaging things. And this is a point that a lot of people don't know, is that your liver under a stressful event produces as much sugar as a candy bar. So if you think about somebody who gets blood sugar problems, right? They go, I can't believe it. I don't eat sugar. I don't eat dessert. How did I get that? Well, it wasn't what you were eating. It was what was eating you. This stress, because our body, we used to eat very little sugar. In fact, you could get away with pretty much not eating any sugar. And they've done study after study. We don't need all the carbs that, especially the food pyramid. If people are still looking at the food pyramid, you need to flip that on its end and do it the exact opposite, because that food pyramid was designed for feed yards. It's to take a small pig and make a big one for slaughter, and you can see what's happened to the American people, that follow that rule. You want to reduce your sugar, you want to get the relaxation you need. And we do a lot of light therapy at our house. We're testing out a piece that's really cool. I need to, once we get it done, you'll learn about it through BrainTap. But John Ott, he's the guy that everybody's quoting his research about different full spectrum light. He's dead now, but his group is still around. And we used to work with them in the 80s. So they contacted me about 6 months ago and said they have this new daylight, they call it. And it basically resets your circadian rhythm. So I always read in the morning too, for about a half hour, 45 minutes, a real book, because I get a lot of books given to me, or I go on an interview with somebody and they tell me about it. So when and I can read pretty fast, but I read with that light every morning and it resets my circadian rhythm. So we're always doing things with light. I'm always experimenting with myself. If you came to our lab here in BrainTap, we have a 14-station biohacking lab that when our doctors come in, they go through. So, if I'm feeling drained or stressed, I have nobody to blame but myself. I have all the tools here. So, that's the main thing.
But you do feel still stressed from time to time, I assume, right?
Oh, yeah. I think I believe in, when I was doing my research, the Buddha said, all unhappiness stems from unfavorable comparisons. And I think that's what brings about a lot of stress, is we think we should get something done, or we have, I have a team of 39 people working at BrainTap now. I know when we probably first started working, I probably had 6, so it just keeps building. And now I don't know what most of them are doing. I'm not in charge of them anymore. We brought in a CEO, and so I can do what I do. I like to do the research, and I have to be available to do speaking. I'm going to a biohacking conference down in Vegas. Leave tomorrow. It's going to be a weekend event. And so these are the kind of things I like to do. So when you're first starting a business, of course, you're the janitor, the bookkeeper, everything it takes to get it done. I'm now fortunate that pretty much I can do what I want on a day-to-day basis as far as, but I still work a lot. My wife's always reminding me that, I can't stop.
You got to live by your own values.
Yes. Yeah. I don't really feel like I'm working. It's like, it's always fun. And if I do, when I start, I know myself personally, when I start to falter or feel stressed, like if I'm going to go in and do a recording, I will always do a BrainTap session before I do that recording, because I know the voice. There's a lot of analysis now that shows voice analysis and stress and things. And so I don't want that to come across on my recording. I want it to be focused and calm and, things of that nature.
Yeah, I actually just had a podcast interview with a nervous system and adrenal support coach. And she was actually talking about exactly that. She was talking about how we should connect with people on a day-to-day basis that not have a lot of stress, that are more like therapeutic, because your brain and your nervous system matches those frequencies. And you can pick up when you're working with people that are stressed all the time, and you'll just match that energy.
Yeah. Animals are really smart. I have out of my grandkids, my granddaughter is so calm, relaxed. Animals all love her, but my grandson, he's like a phonetic machine. He's always, he's an athlete. He's a little athlete, but he loves dogs and cats, but they like repel from him. And I said, you just got to breathe. I'm trying to say, Eli, just breathe, relax. But his energy, people can feel that when he comes in the room. He's just like a ball of, they say he's a ball of energy. That's what he is. Yeah. And it doesn't work when you're trying to be with animals, for sure.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What is you were just mentioning you have 11 studies that are coming out, and I think as I watched the Instagram live actually this morning, you said that they are coming in a book.
Yeah, if you go to Amazon now, actually I published them.
Oh, great.
It's brain fitness research with BrainTap technologies, and it's actually a perfect bound book. I think we actually included your study in there. So your study's in that book, telling people about it and things of that nature. We're going to continue to increase that. Our doctors wanted to know, because when I talk about the studies, they go, where are all these? And so we sent them to them, but they wanted us to organize them all in one place so they could put them in their front lobby, or their, the reception area, so people could realize that BrainTap actually has been researched. And this research, unlike a lot of people, this is our research. It's all about our equipment. It's not somebody else's research doing visualization or, using light therapy or sound therapy. This is actually using BrainTap.
So let's talk a little bit about BrainTap, because we've been talking a lot about it, and people that are listening to you the first time, they're probably like, so what does BrainTap do? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Right. Some of the main things BrainTap does, it does a lot of physiological things, but the main thing it does, it's going to train the brain. That's why we call it brain fitness. When everyone is in a constant state of low-level chronic stress nowadays. There's just so much going on. It's not the 1940s anymore where, we have this island time where we don't remember what's going on, the news cycle, all that. So we're going to down-regulate the sympathetic system. The sympathetic system, we call that our survivor brain. So most people are running around, their survivor brain is locked in. If you want to think about that as your gas pedal, and they've got that pushed to the floor because they want to succeed at all costs, go, go, go. And then you have this parasympathetic system that's the brake. And so they never get to the brake because the gas pedal is mashed down. So what we do is we're going to disengage and train the brain, because there's 5 primary brain waves. And while we're talking here, our primary brainwave should be beta, because we're having a conversation. And we need to have alpha involved, which is the one that's a daydreaming kind of state between being awake and sleep. You need that to speak. So if you're not relaxed when you communicate, that's why people have a fear of public speaking. As soon as they stand up, they get stressed out, they lose alpha, and they don't remember what to say. The information's there, but they can't get to it. So what BrainTap does is it gives you the ability or the capacity to practice getting in and out of these other brain waves. Just like heart rate variability, they know that you want to be able to handle stress, you want to be able to relax. If you stay stuck in any neurological state, that's unhealthy. We now know any one brainwave state is also not healthy. So we're going to train it. So for instance, as we get better looking and more intelligent with age, there's a brainwave that's called SMR, sensory motor rhythm. This is the brainwave that if you don't exercise it, you're going to lose cognition, you're going to lose your balance and equilibrium, and somebody's going to tell you it's your muscles. Well, muscles have something to do with it, but what moves the muscles? The brain. It's the brain. So we have to train the brain first. So anything you're doing, for instance, we've actually shown when we were featured in People magazine, we showed them just by tuning up your brain, you can increase your metabolic function by over 25%. That was in one of our studies. So you didn't have to do anything to change your diet, nothing. You didn't have to do any work. You just basically tuned up your brain. Once your brain started regulating at what we call the master brainwave, which is a mixture of all 5 of those, not just one of them, and that's what we train to, then your metabolism starts to return again like it was when you were a child. Most people, when they're kids, of course, they could eat whatever they wanted, do whatever they wanted. Of course, they were more active, but their nervous system, you could get away with doing things because the nervous system was tuned up. The other is that we're gonna see a big increase in memory, focus, and concentration with BrainTap. We always say that when we're talking about our morning sessions, we call it digital coffee for a reason, because when you wake up in the morning, you should be supercharged, ready to go. That's if you've had a good night's sleep, we all had that feeling. They go, wow, I slept really good, and you can get more done. Well, that should be the normal. Not like you shouldn't, you'd be celebrating every morning if that was the case. And then in the middle of the day, when we have that lull time, like you said, it's going to help to pick up that energy. So what we did in your case was BrainTap took information people didn't know or were just learning about, because there's a lot of stress in learning. People don't realize that. So to master something, they say it takes 10,000 hours, right? And our goal is, how can we change that? What we showed at Quantum University was we could take a 10,000 hour course, reduce it down to 3,000. So if you can cut off 2/3 of the learning, because you still have to do it, you still have to do the work, but now how quickly can we get that into the subconscious so you start acting on that information? That's where BrainTap excels. But the main reason people use it though is sleep, is to get them better sleep. I mean, when we look at our statistics, like the 6 million listenings, I would say at least 1/3 of them were our Delta series to get people to sleep. People aren't sleeping very well nowadays. So we need to get them
for sure.
better.
Yeah, and I always have like the people, like I have a live session going on right now with the Peak Performance Method program, and people always tell me, like I'm listening to it, but I'm always falling asleep. And I'm like, that's actually a good thing. So don't worry about it if you're falling asleep, because it will actually improve your sleep quality. So yeah. And so tell us a little bit more about neuroplasticity as well. So I was just thinking, I remember that the last podcast interview that we did together was specifically on the 5 brainwave states. So if people are interested to listen to that one, I'll share the episode in the show notes below, so you don't have to worry about that. But let's talk a little bit more about neuroplasticity as well.
So when we think about neuroplasticity today, think of it as energy. The more energy we have in the brain, the more neuron connections, the smarter. So I always tell people, think of neuroplasticity like when you go to buy a computer and it says it's a 660 or 880, whatever it is. We always want a faster computer. I don't know anybody that goes to the store and says, I have a fast computer, I'd like a little slower one. That doesn't happen. So our brain works better with energy. So what we're doing with BrainTap is we're going to put light in, retinal flashing, your eyes are closed, and lights into the ears. Now, sound also brings in energy. We've all been to parties and we didn't really want to be there, but they started playing music we liked. We start tapping our toes, start dancing a little bit. And our friends might say, I thought you didn't want to come. And you go, well, they're playing my music. That's because every cell of our body has these collector cells, which are called chromophores. And these chromophores are like little batteries at the cells that feed the ATP production. ATP is what we need to heal. So when we think about brain and neuroplasticity, what we're really looking at is how much energy did we produce? So we can produce that energy by sunlight, or I like to tell people they now know the most underprescribed nutrient is sunlight or light. It doesn't have to be sunlight, but it can be, manufactured by some of these biohacking experiences. But that light builds this neuroplasticity. So once you have the energy in the brain, now the brain can do something with it. You can heal, you can grow. The study that I mentioned that's part of that 11 piece was a pilot study we did with women 55, 65. And in 6 weeks, we showed that we improved their neuroplasticity by 49%. And they were no longer on the spectrum. So now they have to at least do BrainTap 3 times a week to maintain that. But when we're going back, we're checking in with them a year later, like we did with the other study. Every person in the study is still doing a minimum of twice a day. Now we had them do it 3 times a day when you're in that situation. Okay. So when think of neuroplasticity like our brain, think of it like a hard drive. All the information's there, but there's something called a file allocation table, right? That most people might not know about, but that's how your computer knows where to go get the file, right? It's a abbreviated version of, hey, what happens if you don't have neuroplasticity is our personal file allocation table gets rewritten and says, we don't have enough energy to hold the information for all the files. They're there, but you can't get access to them. So the brain the less energy just starts shrinking. And our brain, every night, for instance, when we go to sleep, they say that our brain dehydrates. It actually loses about 3/4 of an inch, but then when we drink water in the morning and liquids, it rehydrates. But if you're chronically dehydrated, the brain never comes back. And that's why people that are dehydrated get headaches and foggy brain and all those things. Mm-hmm. But you can't have energy without water. And that's why for brain and neuroplasticity, we found adding like Celtic salt, the mineralizing the water. So you can, that the brain needs that, just like a battery would need that kind of acid kind of content to do it. So the brain, think of every cell like a battery, and neuroplasticity is when those cells communicate with one another through these dendrite connections. And then what happens is once the brain knows those neurons that are firing together, they'll start wiring together, creating a program. And a perfect example is people who speak more than one language. Right? So that's a brain circuit, that's neuroplasticity. But in my case, when I was 7 years old, my brain said, you know what, we're not going to learn another language. We're with our tribe. This is the only language we're going to do. So it shut down that circuit. And probably in your case, you speak a couple of languages. Our science officer speaks 6 languages. He's from Brazil. In Francisco, we were walking through India. We're there for 3 weeks. He's speaking Hindi before we're leaving. And I said, Francisco, wow, when did you learn Hindi? He goes, I didn't. I've just picked it up since I've been here. Because he still had the brain circuit that learns language. The way we teach language is ridiculous. We don't learn it that way. As a child, could you imagine setting down an infant and teaching them how to do that? We learn through immersion, and our brain just figures it out. It's this wonderful mechanism, but it can't happen without neuroplasticity. If the brain was fixed, like my brain, the neuroplastic part of language got overwritten because our brain's always looking to conserve energy. But it's like a muscle. So when you're out there exercising, going for your hikes, riding your bikes, doing all those things, you're building up the muscles. At first, those muscles rebel. They say, hey, I'm sore, I don't want to do it. But if the resilience comes because you give it time for a break, then you do it again. Then you give it a little time for a break, you do it again. And pretty soon the muscles start to build. And just like the muscles get stronger, so does the brain with the neural connections. And pretty soon the brain basically stays lit, stays active, and doesn't shut down again. And that's really what we're looking to do. And I believe personally that any brain at any age can get better. I've seen it too many times. And what they're telling us in the medical world, the medical model is, no, we don't have a pill for it, so we can't fix it. The reality is pills don't always fix everything. We have our own neurotransmitters, we have our own biology. And when we're using that biology to improve our brain function, that energy is going to sustain over the long run.
Yeah.
Tuning in that way.
Yeah. You know, when I hear you speak, especially today, I'm always thinking, I wonder when Patrick is going to be interviewed at Oprah's. I'm always like, that's going to be the next step. That's going to happen, because it's just so fascinating what you've been doing and being able to research as well over the last few years with BrainTap, you know?
Yeah, we've had some pretty big, I've been interviewed just in the last 2 weeks by some pretty big news outlets.
Yeah.
I was just on the news with CBS, so hopefully it's coming. You know, we're getting there, and they're opening up again, so we can actually do some things. I'd like to, if I do some interviews like that, I'd rather it not be on Zoom. I'd rather go into the studio and do it live.
See those people in person. Yeah, no, for sure. It's wonderful to see how we're finally getting back to almost the normal life. I've been talking to a lot of people that are starting to travel again, so it's nice to see that. Okay, well, you know, as always, I find it so fascinating to listen to you. And I know this is certainly not the last time that I have you on the podcast, because you're just such a wealth of information, and I'm learning something new every time. So thank you so much for being on the show and for sharing your wisdom with us. So a couple of things. So BrainTap is absolutely wonderful, and I highly encourage everyone to at least check it out. So I will leave a link in the show notes to get, I think it's a 2-week first trial to test out BrainTap and see if you like it. It's really fascinating. It helps with sleep. We were able to research and prove that it actually helps with productivity, because obviously when your mind is rested, you have more capability to focus and to concentrate, and that's obviously what you want to do as a peak performer. And then, as I mentioned as well, we have 2 other podcast episodes already recorded over the last 3 years now. So feel free to check that out as well. And then I will also add the link to the show notes about the brain fitness research by BrainTap. And I'll also add our link to our BrainTap research that we did specifically on the peak performance method program. And then, is there anything else, Patrick, that I forgot?
When they do that 15-day trial, there's also, they get to download my full book, Thrive in Overdrive. So they'll learn a lot more there, how to handle stress, gives them some tips and things like that. And it's a full book. If you have like Kindle or a book reader, you can read it on your digital devices and really learn a little bit more about it.
I love that. Yeah, Thrive and Overdrive. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I wish you a wonderful rest of your day.
You too. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.